you're healing and when you're on your journey, you have to be okay with not being liked.
Mm,
You have to be okay with rocking the boat. You have to be okay with challenging the status quo.
mm,
And if you're so caught up on like, but what would they think? What will my mom say? This and that, like you're going to stay perpetually stuck.
mhm.
So you have to be like, okay, I'm doing this for the greater good. I'm doing this because I know I don't want to repeat patterns.
Yeah.
And if it means I have to burn some bridges, so be it.
Hello, hello, and welcome back to Journey of a Fearless Female. I am your host, Paola Rosser, and this week my guest is Edna Méndez. She's a life coach who helps individuals break toxic cycles and grow their confidence. For the past 3 years, she's been helping individuals heal from toxic relationships, dysfunctional family dynamics, breaking generational trauma, and really helping people rebuild the relationship they have with themselves. So, everybody, please welcome Edna. I found her on TikTok and her content really spoke to my soul. And I'm so excited to have her here on the podcast because we are going to have a beautiful conversation and I cannot wait. Everybody, please welcome Edna.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be on here and I'm so glad we connected on TikTok. It's crazy what social media does now, right? You just meet a lot of people, you connect and you become friends like that.
Yes, your content really resonated with me a lot, especially because I grew up in a toxic, dysfunctional family. And a lot of your content is like how to heal from that, how to really set boundaries, how to acknowledge that your voice, your words, everything is valid. Your trauma really did happen.
Yeah.
And you and I resonate so much because we're both, for those of you who aren't watching us on YouTube, we're both Mexican. We're both from that line of, everything stays behind closed doors and we don't speak about what happens. So let's get into your fearless female journey. Where did your journey begin? Let's go back.
Oh, my journey really began when I was a child. Honestly, when I was
Right?
yeah, there was a lot of trauma very early on. I remember so my first recollection of me deciding like, hey, something has to change was when I actually caught my dad cheating on my mom. There
Mm,
was an incident when he took us to go see the other lady. And I remember in my gut going like, this isn't right. This
yeah.
is wrong. Like I need to tell my mom. And he would always tell us, you have to not tell anybody, keep it a secret, hush hush type of deal. But that day where he took us to the swimming pool and I met the lady and her children, I was just like, no, I can't do this. And I remember getting so super mad and being like, I don't want to be here. Like, I need to tell my mom. And half of me didn't want to tell my mom because I didn't want to hurt her feelings. But the other half of me was like, this isn't right. Especially I was a child. I was put in a situation where this is an adult issue, but here he's an adult bringing a child into this. So I decided to tell my mom. And so that's when boom, an explosion of fight occurred. There was, a lot of argument back and forth. My mom found out. She was really upset, but she was very thankful of me and like telling her about the situation. But my family comes from a very toxic relationship. So it's kind of like, okay, we're going to fight. We're going to throw this big tantrum, this whole show, yada, yada, yada. And then we're going to leave and then we're going to come back like nothing ever happened. And that's the
Yes.
worst.
I totally resonate with that so much. It happens in my family a lot where you do have these explosive fights, and it's not just like negative words being thrown at each other, but like actual physical fights. And
Mhm.
then, we would have moments where we wouldn't speak for months, sometimes even years. And then we would just come back as if nothing happened.
Yeah.
No apology, no let's break down what happened, let's validate each other's feelings. There was none of that. There's no resolution. It was just like, let's just pretend nothing happened and go back to normal, which I think for a child is so confusing,
Yes.
because like you're a child and you're looking to your adult parents, your guardians, for how we should move through life, how we should show up. And then, as you were saying earlier, your dad taking you to meet his mistress, his other woman, it's like, you're the adult, and you're
Yeah,
as a little kid, you're like, this is wrong, and then they're telling you like, shh, don't tell anybody. You're like, no, I have to. I love that you did tell her. And I love that your mom actually, believed you and gave you a good response rather than the opposite, which occurs many times where the child wants to
absolutely.
tell them the truth and then they get mad at the child versus the person they should be getting mad at. Can I ask you a question?
Of course.
How old were your parents when they got married?
Okay. So give me a second. I have to think
Mhm.
about this one. So they came to this country when they were 15 years old. And I think they met when they were 18 years old. So
Mm,
probably they married when they were 21.
yeah.
I'm guessing 21. And then they had my older sister, when my mom was 25, I believe. I
Mm.
believe. So
Still so young though.
so young, so
So
young.
young.
And that's where I don't blame my parents for a lot of trauma. And this is where I really healed because I have to take a step back and remember they came from a different generation,
Mhm.
different upbringing, different values, beliefs. They come from a small town in Mexico where the language is not even Spanish. It's Zapoteco. It's like their
Mm,
indigenous language. So I cannot fault them for that, right?
yeah.
They chose not to heal, and that's their choice. But I'm just choosing not to have the same ideologies as them.
Yeah, I think that that happened for me too, where I was bitter and angry towards my mom for over 20 years. And it wasn't until I pulled the lens back and realized that she also came from a lot of trauma and a lot of
Yeah.
unhealed generational toxic behaviors that she just learned and passed down. And
Yeah.
um you have to understand too, it's like, for those of you who are listening, it's like you need to figure out, where did they come from, what did they
Mhm.
learn, what were their patterns that they kept recreating. And like you said, they came from a country that didn't even speak Spanish, or they came from like my parents both came from Mexico, and they lived in a small town where their house was made out of sod. It was a 1-bedroom house. They had an outhouse for a bathroom. Like, the education level was not there.
Mhm.
Therapy was not there. Reading self-help
Yeah.
books was not there.
Yep.
Psychology wasn't there. They didn't think that way. And they also were very young when they got married. It's kids having kids.
Mhm.
And so they're only going by what they know.
Mhm. Absolutely. That's a great point. Kids having kids, and there were children. And that's what's really important when you're trying to heal from any anger or bitterness or resentment you have to kind of put yourself in their shoes and have compassion for them.
Hmm.
They only knew what they knew. My mom's highest level of education was the fifth grade.
Yeah.
So
Mine was third grade.
yeah,
It's like,
yeah,
yeah, it's in those
absolutely.
days that you went to school for as much as you can learn, and then you
Mhm.
went to work because they
Yeah.
needed to make money. And that's another thing that, like, I had to put myself in my mother's position in order to find forgiveness and
Mm.
grace. But yeah, there's so much to talk about with family generational trauma that we can talk for hours. But
Yeah.
I really wanted you to talk about, because I saw a couple of your videos, but I really wanted you to talk about is breaking that generational trauma. Yes, we can have compassion and grace for our parents, but when do you start to recognize that A, you're repeating the patterns, and B, it's time for you to change or to break that cycle?
Absolutely. It begins with self-awareness, and healing doesn't look the same for everybody. That's what I want to say. Like, the way you healed might not be the same way I healed. So it really depends on the person and what's going on and what's happening in their world. For you, you said that you needed to forgive your mom and let go of some anger or resentment, whatever was there. And for me, it was with my dad. But
Mm,
regardless, as it begins with that self-awareness. Hey, something's going on that's keeping me stuck, and I feel like I'm getting nowhere. How can I
mhm,
move forward from here? And then another thing is with relationships. Let's say that you start going like, oh, I keep getting to the same type of people. Is it me? What's going on? If you don't fix the pattern that's within you, what's going to happen is that you're going to end up with the same person, just with a different face. And so you
Mm.
have to realize, what is it, the pattern that I'm allowing? What's going on here? What is okay and what's not okay with me? What am I tolerating? What am I not tolerating? What is my self-talk like? What
Mhm.
am I saying to myself? What are my beliefs about relationships, about myself, my self-esteem, my self-worth? And
Yeah.
start from there.
Yes. And I think also in our culture, if you watch the telenovelas, it's all
Mhm.
about the drama and it's all about
Uh-huh.
the toxic behavior. And, I always think about that with my mom because she was obsessed with telenovelas. And so,
Mhm.
when she didn't have like a real proper education or, real kind of like instruction on how to be, and she learned from telenovelas how to maneuver life. And in telenovelas, it's all drama and toxic
100%.
behavior. It's all cheating and slapping and pulling each other's hair because that is what gets the ratings. But that's not a way to live your life. And that was the chaos that ensued in our home, was just this constant toxic behavior. I liked one of your TikToks where you were like, the way you speak to a child, if you spoke like that to an adult, would they have the same reaction? And some of the times I think to myself at how my mom would speak to us, not just behind closed doors, but in public as a child. Like, if a woman talked to me that way, now that I'm in my 40s, I would be like, excuse me. But we allow ourselves to talk to our children that way. And
Yeah.
I've done so much healing to know that I didn't hate my mom in the beginning when I was being spoken to that way or when I was physically being abused. I took it upon myself like there was something wrong with me.
Mhm.
I wasn't mad at her. I just felt like, well, I have to be better. I have to be a better daughter. I have to do things better so that she could love me. And it created this like type A personality in me where I was like, I have to strive to be good because then that's when I will get her attention, not knowing that it was far deeper than that, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. You brought up very good, interesting points. So the first point is the drama. A lot of people are addicted to drama, just as they're addicted to alcohol or drugs. And that's a pattern some people carry. So if you saw a lot of drama growing up and you saw it was the norm in your household, you're going to want to have some type of drama in your life. You don't realize that you inadvertently are looking for it, and it can show up in your friendships, in your relationships, in your workplace. You said that when you were a child, you didn't see it that way, right? And
Mhm.
it's because when we're children, we're seeking that approval, right? We're born seeking that approval because we're on survival mode. We don't know anything outside of our world. We just know our family.
Yeah.
And what they say goes, what they say is right. And we want them to accept them. Why?
Yeah.
Because we need needs. We need to be fulfilled with our needs. And
Yeah.
that's why we keep accepting that approval. But
Yeah.
what happens is, if your family doesn't teach you about being independent, if they don't tell you about, like, okay, you have your own individual identity, I have my identity, we don't have to mesh, we don't have to do this whole codependency. If they teach you words like that, you're going to be a more healthy, functional adult. But if they
Mhm.
don't teach you about that, you're still going to be seeking that approval when you're a teenager, when you're a young adult, when you're adult, when you're older. It continues on unless you decide, okay, things need to change.
Yeah. And they do. And I think one of the biggest reasons why, especially if you're first generation American, when they're saying like family's thicker than, water, or
Yeah.
blood is thicker than water, we need to stick together. It's because you do come to a new country and the only people you feel like you can trust is your family.
Hmm.
And I understand that perspective. But when your family is the place where you're being hurt and abused and it's a
Hmm.
toxic environment, the blood is thicker than water kind of goes out the door, right?
Absolutely. I actually have a really funny story to go with this. So, when I went to Mexico with my sister, my aunt, I went with my grandma, and my grandma's super into brujeria and all of that. And okay, and which is fine. I'm not against it. So, she took us to the forest and she made us in the forest. There was like little bottles of people's faces, and there was like an upside cross. It was just really scary. And I
Uh-huh.
was like, oh, this is like real, real. So anyways, so she took out like a box of cigarettes and she blew on it. And she said, I want you to blow on it and then throw it in the lake. My sister went first and she did it. And you see the two cigarettes going like this, going straight.
Mhm.
And she told my sister, oh, good. You're a good place. You're a good daughter. You listen to your family. You're obedient, this and that. And she's like, your turn, Edna. So I did it. And the two cigarettes went like this. They separated. And she's like, oh my God. Oh my God, Edna. She started freaking out. And I'm just there like, what's going on? Because she's not speaking Spanish. She's speaking her native language.
Yeah.
And I'm just smiling. And she said, you don't listen to your family. I can tell that you're not obedient to your parents. You have to listen to your dad. You have to, what he says goes, and no matter what. And I was just kind of trying to add logic as to why, trying to explain to her, like, the cigarettes move because of the water currents and whatever, but she wasn't having it. She was just like, you need to listen to your dad. And there's no need to explain or over explain yourself or try to justify yourself to people who are very set on their ways. You
Mm.
can't expect them to change. They are who they are. The only person who can change is you. So in that moment, I was like, you know what? I'm not even going to try to tell my grandma that she's wrong. I'm not even going to try to explain myself. I know what I'm doing is for myself and my inner peace, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah. And that's a real struggle for people who want to still be included in the tribe. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? And that's one of the biggest things that it took me a long time to like be okay to be separate, because for the longest time I wanted to be accepted by all of them. You know, I come from a big family, and so I wanted to be accepted by my sisters, by my brother, by my mom, by my dad. I wanted that. I wanted the family. I wanted the blood is thicker than water. But then the more that I was doing my healing, I realized, hey, we're not on the same path here. We're not talking
Yeah.
the same language. We're not,
Yeah.
understanding each other. And I, for a year, literally was banging my head up against the wall, trying to get them to heal, trying to get them to acknowledge what happened in our past, trying to help them talk about, like, let's go to therapy together as a family. No, they did not. They did not want to go to therapy, and they did not want to uncover all the things that are hurting us still to this day. They want to just pretend as if nothing is happening and everything is fine, and we're just going to like pray it away and it's going to
Yeah.
go away. And to some extent, yes, prayer works, but
Mhm.
if we don't really like dig deep as to why we are the way we are, to really correct how our boat is going, then we're going to continue to hit the same rocks.
Absolutely. Well said. Exactly. Like, I truly believe in prayer. It's powerful, but there's more to it. There's more. It's understanding what behavioral patterns am I repeating? Like the people pleaser, right? Like that's a big one in Latin families. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of the time, especially for women. So
Exactly.
if you tend to be a people pleaser, you tend to attract narcissistic people or people with narcissistic traits, right? So that's definitely a pattern that I know I saw a lot growing up. My mom was the people pleaser, the obedient one, submissive one, the one who, never rocks a boat, who's hush hush, who does what the husband does. And in doing so, you only hurt yourself. In doing so, you're teaching yourself my self worth, my love is based on the condition that I meet their needs. I meet their standards, that I'm okay with them. I need their approval, validation to make sure that I'm okay. But
Yeah.
doing that erodes your self esteem.
Yeah, it does. And I think it's huge in the Mexican culture, especially for women, to do as the man says. He is the
Yes.
head of the household. He's going to protect you. He's going to feed you. And you're going to have to put up with all of their bullshit, whether they're cheaters, whether they're abusers, whether they both physically, emotionally, sexually, whatever abusing, you still have to follow the man. And in some cultures, and not just Mexican cultures, they really minimize the woman to the point where they're not allowed to have an education. They're not allowed to have a job outside of the house. They're not allowed to go read or have friends unless they're approved, because it really goes back to the old ways of things are done, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you brought up something that I was like, oh, I kind of want to bring this up. I'm gonna bring it up. So I saw this video on Instagram or TikTok, I can't remember. And it was this girl talking about like, I want to be a stay-at-home mom and I want to bring back the patriarchy. I'm okay with being obedient. I want to make this disclaimer first. There is absolutely nothing wrong with being a stay-at-home parent. Nothing wrong with that. That is a full-time job, a full-time commitment, and kudos and mad respect to the people who do it. There's a difference, though. There's a difference between that and the patriarchy system, the beliefs. So when you grow up in that patriarchy system, as you and I have, you know that it's not about being a teamwork. It's about being controlled, being manipulated, being dominated, and being enmeshed and being codependent on a person. That's unhealthy because then what happens is your identity gets erased. It's
Mhm.
no longer who am I, it's who are we. And then what happens if you have children and the children go off and then your spouse decides to leave you? You're going to be stuck. Like
Mhm.
what's going to happen to me? Who am I? I'm lost. I'm so lost because I've been so enmeshed for so long.
Yeah.
And that's actually what's happening with my mom right
Yeah.
now.
And it's crazy because people think like, oh, that only happened in the 50s. You'd be surprised how many women today in 2023 don't have an identity outside of their marriage, outside of being a mom. At some people, like I have a client recently who I had to help open a checking account because she's getting a divorce and the husband took care of everything. And now all of a sudden she's got to start from square one. And to me, it's like as a woman, we should learn how to take care of ourselves. We should learn like a craft. You shouldn't lose yourself. Like you said, be codependent on this person because yes, then you lose total control. And that is called narcissistic abuse, where they isolate you. And now that you're solely dependent on them so that they can control you, abuse you, and have all say on you. And unfortunately, it's like very rampant, not just in our culture, but cultures all across, even in Western United States, women are dealing with this kind of abuse. And yeah, people can say, let's bring back the patriarchy. It's because you probably have never been in a narcissistic abusive relationship. You've probably never been dominated by a man. You probably don't understand what it's like to be totally controlled. And yes, being a stay at home mom is amazing when you have the right, loving, healthy partner who is
Yes.
going to be your husband, your partner in life. It's like people just throw out these words and they haven't done their research and
Yeah.
they haven't spoken to people who have actually been in the patriarchy, been in communism, been in these states for them to say, oh, bring it back. You don't know. You have
Yeah.
no clue, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that's even like the patriarchy is a form of communism. It's a form of dictatorship, totalitarianism. It's like big brother is watching you, and that big brother is your spouse who controls you. And I really recommend that movie if you're like, I don't know what patriarchy is. It's 1984. It's a book and it's a movie, and it's just basically telling you like someone watches you and you're constantly being watched by this person and whatever they say goes. It's the same thing as patriarchy, right? And I
Yeah.
think you made a very good point when you said people just throw out these terminologies without realizing what these terms actually mean and what it
Mhm.
entails. And when you live through it, it's a completely different experience than someone who has not lived through it. You
Yeah.
know, something I do want to add though is I truly believe that there needs to be more men mental health
Mm,
awareness.
absolutely.
That's why we keep repeating the patriarchy, because a lot of these men, I empathize with them because they don't know, they don't understand, or they're told they're not a quote unquote man if they go to therapy or if they don't express themselves or they make them made fun of, or it's
Yes.
sad. It's sad. And then what happens? They become alcoholics, they do drugs, they sleep around with different women, they're
Yeah.
lost.
It's it's very prevalent, especially in our culture. I was recently watching the documentary of Cesar Chavez, the boxer, who was like one of the very first Mexican American boxers. And watching his story, he was talking about when he was growing up. he's made fun of because he was effeminate, because he was a very good
Mm.
looking little boy. And so they called him effeminate and they called him gay and they said,
Oh,
man up, and you're such a pussy, and they were
yeah.
calling him all these names. And then at like 12 and 13, his uncles were like, hey, have a beer, be a man. And it's like, they're encouraged to not show any emotion. They're
Mm.
encouraged to not, be afraid and to like man up. And they're literally so traumatized from a young age that they really don't know how to move through the world. And their people that they're looking up to, their fathers, their uncles, their grandparents, don't have the emotional stability or intelligence to be able to have good conversations with them. I mean, as I watched the entire documentary, I felt more and more empathy and compassion for Cesar
Yeah.
Chavez, because it was like he never had a chance. The
Yeah.
poor kid never had a chance. And that's the thing. It's like we all need to go back and understand why we are the way we are,
Mhm.
pull the lens back, like you said earlier, investigate the patterns, investigate where we came from, and really start to unpack and find the therapist, find the life coach, find the books that you need to read, the podcast you need to hear. But yes, men in general, all together, not just in our culture, need more mental health. Just recently, there was a shooting just down the street from my house, and it was a man who went through a divorce. He's an ex-cop, and he went there to go kill his ex-wife because he was suffering from the loss of the depression of divorce. And when a man cannot express himself verbally and emotionally, what's the next thing they're going to go through? Aggression, because that's what they teach little boys. Don't show your feelings. Don't cry. Don't be a pussy. You need to like be a man when they're like 3, 4, 5. It's okay if they cry. It's okay if they process through the emotion. But if you don't allow the child to process through the emotions and you only allow them to exert anger,
Mhm.
imagine the explosive bomb you're creating when they become an
Yeah.
adult.
Mhm. Absolutely. You brought up a very good point too. When you said the boxer was given a beer at 13. So that's an example of how we start learning bad habits. So that instead of him being like, hey, dad, I'm going through something, let's have a conversation about it. I'm feeling some type of way. The dad goes, let's just have a beer. Let's just drink our problems away. And we don't realize that that's the start of alcoholism.
Mm-hmm.
It begins very early on. And it's because you learned these habits of whenever I feel stressed, whenever I'm going through this, I'm going to turn to this. And that's not okay. And even another point you brought up that I thought was really good was aggression. It is aggression. A lot of men are taught to be masculine, you have to be aggressive, right? Being aggressive, you have to really define what that word means to you. Aggressive might mean something completely different to you than it means to me, to the next guy, so forth. So it's not about being aggressive, it's about being assertive.
Mm.
There's a difference.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of men don't know how to foster relationships outside of either drugs, alcohol, or sex. Like, let's go to the
Mhm.
nudie bar, let's go to the
Yeah.
bar, let's go get high. They don't know how to foster relationships so that they can have these open conversations. And when one person does try to have these open conversations, they are met with resistance or jokes or, ridicule. I saw this funny TikTok. Well, it's not funny, but this white guy is married to a Mexican girl, and he's joking around saying, you hurt my feelings, and she's laughing in the background saying, well, that's just how we are as Mexicans. That's how we are. We joke. That's the way we communicate. And it's funny because when I met my husband, and I come from a family who jokes until they make you cry,
Mm.
I used to joke with my husband in the beginning of our relationship, and he would tell me, I don't like those jokes. They're not funny. You're hurting my feelings. And I was like, I never was met with that. With my family, it was like, I'm going to joke, you're going to joke, we're going to hurt each other's feelings until one of us has an explosive fight and walks out, and then we don't talk for a year. Like that was the
Yeah.
pattern and the cycle. And my husband stopped me and he was like, that's not funny jokes. That's hurtful jokes. And that is attacking my spirit. I don't like that. And I was like,
Yeah.
wait a minute, this is a whole different type of relationship. And it really did start to help me change and become more self-aware of the pattern that I was recreating.
That's a good point. And another point to add on to that, and thank you so much for sharing that, is humor. A lot of the times when we don't know how to process or have a conversation about our emotions, our go-to feeling is humor. We laugh in serious moments, or we laugh when we don't know what to do next, and that actually is unhealthy.
Yeah.
It's not healthy to, like, when you're going through something, you start giggling. It's because you don't know how to let that emotion enter and then exit it in a healthy way. So you like resort to your comfort emotion, which is laughter. And
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with humor. Don't get me wrong. I'm not like a,
No, but
yeah, yeah.
that's one of the reasons why most comedians are committing suicide and are depressed.
Mm,
Is because they never learned how to really process their
yeah.
emotions. They just learned how to be the funny person and, oh, I'm just gonna let it slide. Look at me, I'm self-deprecating. No, you're allowing people to step all over you. You're allowing people to have no boundaries and treat you in a certain way or a certain manner. And it's just really sad that we didn't get these lessons early on, but I am so thankful now that I'm watching all these videos and people like early as 19, 20 years old starting their healing journey. I think we are coming into a different era in the earth. There's going to be better people in the future because we're not going to be carrying so much weight and so much toxic behavior and so much like negativity in the future. But for those of us who didn't get a chance to live in that era, it's time for us to heal, right?
Yeah,
It's time for us to
absolutely.
really start that healing journey and break the patterns because you don't want to take this on to your grandchildren, to your children, to your great grandchildren. You really want to stop the process of the pain and tragedy that we continue to carry forward.
Absolutely. And to add to that, a lot of this new term called gentle parenting gets a lot of, am I allowed to curse? Shit for it, right? There's a
Yeah.
lot of people are like, ah, that's so stupid, this and that. Well, you have to realize it's not about never disciplining your child, because I truly believe in disciplining children. That's one of my areas of expertise, right? But there's a way to do it.
Hmm.
There's a way to talk to them in a way that they understand that their behavior has consequences.
Yeah.
And then you stick to those consequences and you teach them a lesson through that. It's not about hitting them, yelling at them, shaming them, judging them, criticizing them. That's only causing trauma, fear, anxiety, depression, so
Eh,
forth. The list goes
yeah,
on and on. So,
absolutely.
yeah, it's just learning how to better communicate, learning how to practice mindfulness. And this is what I tell parents a lot. There are going to be moments where your child is going to test you. They're going to test you and you're going to be like, "Oh my God." Your go-to response might be something that happened to you as a child. You might feel the urge to take out that belt. So you have to, yeah, or chancla,
Or the
whatever it
chancla.
is, whatever,
Yeah.
you have to breathe through it and realize, what is this behavior going to do to my child? What are the long-term effects? Because in
Hmm.
that moment, we just want to be impulsive. That's why it's so important to learn how to control your emotions, manage them,
Yeah.
breathe through it, as simple as, okay, it's okay. Let me talk to him or her. Let's reframe this, let's regroup and let's find a way, let's find a solution, right? Because
Yeah.
if you got hit like we did, what did that do to us? It only caused us to be fearful, full of anxiety. And I'm sure that when you had a problem, you didn't go to your parents because you knew that you were going to get punished for it
Yeah.
instead of getting like support or good advice. It was like, oh, this and that. It's like, no, I don't need that. I'm already dealing with my own shit. I don't need your shit.
Yeah. Absolutely. When I first met my husband, he had two kids from a previous marriage, and my husband never hit his kids. Never. Never really disciplined them in a harsh way, never raised his voice at them. And for me, the first like 2 years, I was like, wait a minute, these kids ain't gonna whoop ass. My husband was like, that's not gonna help. I will never do that. And I would think to myself, you know what, you're right, you shouldn't do that because look what it did to me, right? And then now that they're 16 and 20, they are the most well-adjusted, respectful, loving children. So that whole saying that spare the rod, spoil the child is BS, because we did spoil our kids. Like, we did give them whatever they wanted. They got cars as soon as they turned 16. Every time school started, they got the best Nikes. They got, every sport they wanted. We bought them the best things. We've traveled to nice hotels. Like, they have been given everything, but yet they are the most respectful, sweet kids. You don't have to hit them or discipline them or speak to them in such a negative, harsh way for them to understand, to be more loving and respectful and honoring. Like, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there are some kids that need that. I don't know, but I don't think hitting is the way to discipline your child. There has to be a way that you could speak to them in a stern voice where they still have respect for you, but not to the point where you have to hit them.
Exactly, exactly. And it starts by leading by example. If you want your child to communicate with you, you have to communicate with them. You can't just expect them to spit out all this information if you don't do it to them. Now, I truly do believe it's important to cry in front of your children,
Mhm.
but you also have to be conscious and aware of their age and be aware of like what you want to share with them. Like, for example, if I'm a parent and I have a 5-year-old and I'm going through something, I don't want to hide myself and go like cry in the room. I want to cry and be like, "Hey, mommy's having a moment. I'm feeling a little sad and frustrated, and that's okay. And that's why I'm expressing myself. I'm letting it out, and then I'm gonna go for a nice walk and come back, talk to you or dad or whoever, and feel better about it." That's
Yeah.
a way to move forward.
Yes, I love that. And I did this once with my stepsons because Travis and I got in a fight over something dumb. And they saw us arguing, and obviously the kids are going to watch you argue with your loved one or whatever, or your husband, your
Mhm.
spouse, your partner. And I remember I got in the car and the boys, I could tell. And that's the thing, like, maybe because I'm an empath, I could feel the energy, and you could feel the energy of their laughter and joy shifting to like, now they
Mm.
have to protect themselves. And so I remember getting in the car and saying, your dad and I fought over something really dumb. I've already apologized. He's apologized. Just want to let you know it's not your fault. It has nothing to do with you. And we love you both. And then we got in the car and drove for our, wherever we were going. But I always wanted to have that conversation, because kids, regardless of whether or not you are arguing with them, if you're arguing with each other, they take it upon themselves, like, oh, it's my fault that they're arguing, it's
Yes.
my fault that they are going to get a divorce or leave each other or whatever. They
Yes.
get scared. And not just that, but like, I have a little nephew just recently who threw a ball at me. I wasn't even
Oh.
paying attention, threw me, because I was paying attention to his brother, my other little
Mm-mm.
nephew, and I was giving his brother a lot of attention. And because I wasn't giving him attention, he threw the ball in my face. I turned around, I was like, Calvin, I was like, why did you throw the ball in my face? And he got scared. And I could tell the energy shifted, because his little joyous face turned into I'm scared, and
No.
took the ball and went and like sat in the corner of the farthest corner of the backyard. And I remember I went and got him an ice cream, and I called him over and I gave him a hug and I said, I'm sorry, I snapped for a second. I was not expecting a ball to the face in that moment. I was a little scared. It really did hurt my face. I just want to let you know that you said you're sorry. I accept your apology. I'm not mad at you. There's nothing that you can do to make me stop loving you. And we're okay. Can you give me a hug? And he's like, sure. It's like those moments where you have these conversations with them. Yes, they're children, but they can understand. And they also need that
100%.
reassurance that you're not going to stop loving them, or that their little mistake or their little failure or their little thing isn't going to cause you to stop loving them. On the other hand, for me, whenever I made a mistake, my mom would stop talking to me and
Mhm.
wouldn't talk to me or acknowledge me or even think that I was in the room. She would pretend I wasn't in the room. And what did that do for my self-esteem? I questioned myself for a
Yeah.
long time, even well into my 30s and 40s. Like, there's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with me. And anytime somebody would not return a text or kind of ice me out, I would analyze every little thing I did in that
Yes.
relationship or friendship, because that was what I experienced as a child.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, there's so many like gems that you were spitting out. I was like, I need to write this down. But something you said that I really liked is the way you approached the situation with your nephew. He's a nephew, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so first is you taught him accountability. Hey, I did something wrong. Let me own up to it. First thing. Second, you taught him a boundary. Hey, is it okay if I give you a hug? A lot of the times we assume, oh, that's your aunt, that's your uncle, go give them a hug. No, ask their permission. That's called physical boundary. Good for
Mhm.
you. A lot of times we just do it. No, can I get a hug? You'd want to do that? Is that okay with you? Yes, no, cool. And then the third thing you brought up was when your mom would do it to you, right? That's manipulation.
Mm.
The silent treatment is manipulation at its core, right? So instead of you being like, hey, I can go talk to my mom, she made you feel bad for something that's her problem,
Yeah.
right? Her inability to communicate and regulate her emotions translated as it's your fault, not
Yeah.
mine. And that's shaming. And then you start like doubting yourself and you're like, am I a bad person? And I'm just not good enough. I'm not this and that. And it just
Mhm.
spirals down into like this loop. And,
Yeah.
and it stays with you till you're an adult.
Yeah, I mean, when I was a little kid, I even contemplated suicide because I was like,
No.
my mom, who's supposed to love me, doesn't even want to talk to me to pass the salt. You know, I
Yeah.
I was that bad. Like whatever I did was so bad that she didn't even want to look at me or pass the salt. You know, ask me. She would tell my sister Lilia, tell Paola to pass the salt, as if I didn't
Oh,
exist.
that's
You know, and
terrible.
it's like it's terrible. And these are the things that really like it took me years to untether and unpack and untangle all of these old limiting beliefs. And
Mhm.
it really does stem from little moments like that, that your subconscious mind starts to tell you, you know, oh, you did something bad, you're never going to be loved again, you're not good enough, you're not worthy, there's something inherently wrong with you. And then that
Mhm.
record stays with you and plays for you for the rest of your life. And like you said
Yep.
earlier, it's the same relationship, different faces. And so what I did was, because I had that volatile, unloving relationship with my mom, I accepted the same behavior from
Mm.
friendships, from men, and from coworkers for years to come, until I started to discover that it was me playing that record and allowing this behavior to happen to me.
Absolutely. And to go off that is your mom taught you conditional love, right?
Yes.
As parents, we want to go like, I'm not a parent, but as parents, they want to give their child unconditional love. And but what does that look like, right?
Mhm.
Unconditional love is accepting them for who they are, their strengths, their stretches, all areas of their life. Conditional love is I'll love you based on the condition that you act, behave, think the way I want you to,
Mm.
right? And that's what your mom did to you, right? She was
Yes.
like, I'm not going to talk to you because you're not behaving the way I want you to behave. So I'm going to ignore you and let it be known that that's not okay. As a result of doing that, your self esteem, your self worth started like, you start going like, okay, what's wrong with me? Am I just not good enough for my mom? And like I said earlier, as a child, you want their approval. You want their validation. It's normal. It's healthy. It's part of human nature. But
Mm.
if your parent isn't able to give that to you in a healthy way, that's when you start questioning yourself, your worth, and so forth.
Yeah, because you did something wrong. It could be religious too. For
Mm.
it, like it's such a big deal. I was watching this movie of this girl who was hooking up with one of the pastor's sons or something, and they wanted her to hook up with this other pastor's son. And it was like this crazy movie where the mom was like, "And now I'll never speak to you again because you're a whore and blah blah blah." And she like
Oh,
kicked her out of the house and said, I don't want you to infect the rest of the children. It's like all because
oh,
of this religious, idea that the mom had. And it was just kind of like, it saddened me because, again, that was conditional love. I will only love you if you follow exactly what I tell you to do and follow my religious beliefs and follow exactly what I say. And it's hard because now that girl for the rest of her life is going to think, I'm never going to be good enough. I'm always going to be a whore. I'm always going to be this person, and I'm never going to be loved. Or now God doesn't even love me, and that's even more detrimental to someone's psyche. For me, that whole religious stuff, because I also come from a very religious family. And when I started to kind of get away from the church, because there's a lot of things that I didn't believe in the way the church
Mhm.
runs their things, it was like, oh, how dare you think you know more than the God? You think you know more than the
Uh-huh.
pastor? And I was just
Mhm.
kind of like, okay, they
Yeah.
really got a hold on you. They have this hold on you, and to me, it's hard because again, we want to be part of the family unit. We want to be part of the
Mhm.
tribe. We want to belong. It's inherently in us to want to belong and to be loved and to be cherished. And when you're not following their exact instructions, then you feel like there's something wrong with you.
Yeah. Yep. And that brings up another point. When you're healing and when you're on your journey, you have to be okay with not being liked.
Mm,
You have to be okay with rocking the boat. You have to be okay with challenging the status quo.
mm,
And if you're so caught up on like, but what would they think? What will my mom say? This and that, like you're going to stay perpetually stuck.
mm-hmm.
So you have to be like, okay, I'm doing this for the greater good. I'm doing this because I know I don't want to repeat patterns.
Yeah.
And if it means I have to burn some bridges, so be it. I just
Yeah.
did a recent post right now about this and saying, like, it doesn't mean you have to cut off all your family. It doesn't mean you have to just say, F you, that's it. It looks different for everybody. For some people, if they want to continue that relationship with their family, they could, but they have strong boundaries. Some people just talk to their family on holidays, and that's okay if that works for you. Some people cut off all communication. That's fine. There's
Yeah.
no right or wrong.
No. And, going back to the whole religion thing, I had Taffany, who was on an episode previous to this one, and she was talking about how, because she's very devout Christian, and she was talking about how we need to remove the titles from
Mm,
people because we go with this idea like we have to respect and honor your mom and dad, and you have to respect and honor the family, and blood is thicker than water. And you go through all these dumb sayings that have just been passed down and passed down. But I loved the way Taffany said, just because they carry the title doesn't mean that they are playing the part, and that
mm,
was one of the biggest realizations to me, where my family, my sisters continuously try to berate me with the idea that, oh, I'm such a horrible daughter because I'm not honoring my mother. I'm not giving her the love and the respect that she deserves. And I'm like, well, first of all, she was never the mother
yeah,
that, is in the Webster's definition of it. She was the woman that gave me life,
yeah.
but mother does not fit the description. Like, I have more of a relationship with the woman who's been cleaning my house for over 10 years than the
Mm,
woman that gave me life.
yeah.
And I have such a loving relationship with Sochi that I literally have gone to her daughter's wedding. She is
Mm,
just an incredible part of my life. And
yeah.
I can call her and talk to her about things, and she's there for me more than the woman that gave me life. And just because that person has the title doesn't necessarily mean they play that part in your life. And that is
Amen.
okay.
Amen. Amen. Absolutely. And it kind of goes back to the first question you asked me, like, when did your healing journey begin? When I was probably in the second or third grade, I made the executive decision to start calling my dad by his first name. And I told my mom, and I remember I was very explicit with her, anyone can have sex with a woman and get her pregnant. And yes, I had these words, right? Like very
Mhm.
early on. And I said, anyone can have sex with a woman and get her pregnant. But a dad is someone who like teaches their child stuff, teaches their children morals. I didn't use the word morals, but
Mhm.
whatever at that time was. And I said, I didn't have that. I didn't get that. So he doesn't earn the title. So I'm going to call him by his first name. And so I
Yeah.
did.
Oh,
And that actually helped me so much. I got so much shit for it. I got hit for it. And I got like, in trouble for it. Like, no, he's your dad, this and that. But at the same time, I was like, no, this is my decision. And you can hit me, yell at me, slap me, do whatever you want to me, but I'm going to stick with this. I'm going to put my foot down because no. Till this day, I call him by his first name, but not because like I hate him or anything. Actually, on the contrary, like I've come to accept him and this is his identity and I'm okay with that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that, Edna. I love that you said, I got hit, I got hit. But the fact is, it really takes to be a generational curse breaker like you and I. It takes a lot of strength and a lot of power and resilience. And I see that in you. And that's the reason why, as soon as I saw your videos, I was like, this is my girl. Like me and her,
Yes.
we know what it's like to have to go through the gauntlet, because you
Yeah.
really are going through the gauntlet. It's like, even though you were in second and third grade having that executive decision, I just love that you said that. I had made the executive decision that enough was enough and I'm not going to put up with this. And I think all of us who are those generational curse breakers, we at an early age were in that environment and said, this is not the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
This is
Mhm.
not how it's supposed to feel. And that was
Yep.
one of the things that I specifically remember as a child saying, I should not be living in fear in my house every day as a child.
Mhm.
That's just not childhood.
Yep. Yep.
But everyone else was like, let's just forget it. I wanted to share this post that I saw earlier. I took a picture of it because I knew we were going to be on this on this thing together. It says narcissistic parents push the family first narrative on their children to teach them unconditional acceptance, which translates into I don't have to change, you have to forget and keep taking on my abuse.
Mm, I'm
And that,
snapping.
yeah, and that literally is what you will encounter if you are the generational curse breaker. And that was the
Yes.
thing that I encountered. It was like, you need to just forget about what happened. It was in the past. Jesus has forgiven me. Like,
Mhm.
and so therefore you have to forgive me too. But they don't understand that they let off this toxic bomb, this detonated this bomb, and there is shrapnel in all of us, and it's like reverberated this entire, I can't even think of the word, like the leftovers. We're
Mm.
hanging out like shrapnel in us, and we're like, wait a minute, like I'm trying to move through life with like half an arm because I've been in your detonated bomb.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. That was a beautiful quote to like kind of like wrap things up. It was
Yes.
beautiful. And if you are dealing with someone who's narcissistic right now or who has narcissistic traits, I want to remind people that those individuals are the most insecure, afraid, lonely individuals. And
Mm.
though they may think they have power over you, they're scared and they're afraid and they have really low self-esteem. And that's sad,
Mm.
but that's them at their core.
Beautifully said. Okay, so as we wrap up this episode, what would be your nugget of wisdom for anyone who is listening now?
My nugget of wisdom would be to be okay with rocking the boat, be okay with burning some bridges, be okay with cutting people off, and be okay with healing yourself. Learn that in order for you to heal, you must do what's right for you, what feels right for you. And to add to that, something that I like to tell my clients is there's no real right or wrong decisions. There's just simply consequences to our decisions. So you
Mm.
have to be okay with the consequences of your decisions, whatever you end up choosing.
Oh, I love that. How can my audience find you?
They can find me on Instagram and TikTok. My handle is coach.ed.la.
Oh, I love you. I'm so
Yeah,
excited we
let me
had
go.
this
Oh,
chance.
thank you. Me
Thank you
too. I'm
again for being on
excited.
the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It was lovely, and I really appreciate this conversation.
Me too. Thank you again for listening to Journey of a Fearless Female. I'm your host, Paola Rosser. If you're looking for a life coach or a spiritual mentor, you can book a free discovery call with me at www.fearlessfemale.com. You can also follow me on Instagram at fearlessfemale_coach Subscribe to my YouTube channel at Fearless Female or find me on TikTok. I'm under at paola.rosser. And if you love this episode, make sure you hit subscribe, share it with your friends, and leave a review. I read every single review and I truly appreciate the time you spend writing it.